The human diplomat strode through the rain, sharp eyes scanning the alien guards like a lethal predator, sizing up prey. Patrick Rogers knew the Crinim saw his species as weak, but these naive fools were about to learn why the galaxy feared mankind. Patrick had seen the briefings. The Crinim were an advanced warlike species, but humanity needed their rare minerals to power Earth's mighty warships. Without this trade deal, humankind's galactic expansion would grind to a halt. Millions would die in the resource wars to come. The shuttle touched down with a hiss. Talon, the Crinim commander, waited on the pad, his troops bristling with weapons. Patrick met the alien's cold gaze and smiled. Talon thought his soldiers' gleaming armor and chitinous hides would intimidate the human. He was wrong. Patrick had killed far worse than these overgrown insects. "Welcome to our world," Talon said, hostility bleeding through his words. "I hope you enjoy your stay. It may be your last if negotiations go poorly." Patrick just smirked. That sounded like a threat. "I'll have to inform my fleet in orbit that—" "Have you brought warships?" Talon snarled, mandibles clacking. "This is an outrage, treachery." "No warships," Patrick said. "Just a precaution. So shall we begin?" As he followed Talon to the negotiation chambers, Patrick knew he'd already seized the advantage. The Crinim were rattled. Good. Humans thrived when the odds were stacked against them. These aliens would soon see what terrors mankind was truly capable of. The Crinim negotiation chamber was dark and oppressive. Patrick stepped into the cavernous space, struggling to see through the gloom. Dim lights barely illuminated a long obsidian table that stretched into the shadows. Talon and his subordinates were already seated, their expressions unreadable in the murky light. As Patrick took his seat across from the aliens, Talon began to speak. The discussions opened cordially enough, with each side laying out their desired terms. But as the negotiations wore on, Patrick sensed that something was amiss. Talon's answers to key questions seemed carefully calculated to reveal as little as possible. His underlings kept glancing at each other, as if communicating silently. Patrick's instincts, honed by years of diplomatic wrangling, warned him that the Crinim were concealing something. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Talon's. "Commander, I must insist on complete transparency. If we can't deal fairly with one another, then this arrangement simply won't work." Talon bristled, his mandibles twitching. The atmosphere in the room grew thick with tension. "Are you accusing us of duplicity? I assure you, we have been nothing but forthright." Patrick opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden commotion from outside the chamber cut him off. Shouts of alarm echoed through the halls, punctuated by the unmistakable sound of weapons fire. Patrick sprang to his feet, reaching for the sidearm concealed beneath his jacket. Together with the Crinim representatives, he rushed out to investigate. The sight that greeted them was chilling. In the corridor, a group of human technicians who were supposed to have remained on the shuttle fought desperately for their lives against heavily armed Crinim warriors. Patrick cursed under his breath as realization dawned. This was no random attack. It had to be a ploy by Talon to sabotage the negotiations and gain the upper hand. But what were the Crinim really after, and how far would they go to get it? As his people battled for survival mere feet away, Patrick knew he had to act fast. He needed to protect his crew, get to the bottom of the Crenim's scheme, and salvage this critical trade deal. The future of humanity hung in the balance. Amidst the din of blaster fire and pained shouts, Patrick rallied his beleaguered technicians, guiding them through the maze-like corridors of the Crinim compound. They darted from cover to cover, narrowly evading the pursuing warriors as they sought refuge. At last they stumbled upon a small nondescript room, its reinforced door offering a modicum of safety from the chaos outside. As the adrenaline began to ebb, Patrick took stock of his team's condition. Most were shaken but unharmed, though a few nursed minor wounds from the firefight. Patrick himself had taken a glancing blow to the shoulder, the seared flesh beneath his torn jacket, a testament to the Crenim's ruthless tactics. "What the hell happened out there?" Patrick demanded, his voice a tense whisper. "You were supposed to stay put on the shuttle." The lead technician, a wiry man named Jensen, stepped forward. his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Sir, we found something big. We were just trying to gather more intel, but then they spotted us." Patrick's brow furrowed. "What did you find?" Jensen swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he recounted their discovery. A hidden lab, deep in the bowels of the compound. It was filled with these pulsing machines and tanks holding these things. Mutated creatures, like nothing I've ever seen. We managed to snag a data drive before they caught us, but... A cold dread settled in Patrick's gut as the implications sank in. The Krenim, it seemed, had been engaging in far more than mere trade negotiations. Banned genetic experimentation, weaponized alien species. The scope of their deception was staggering. Patrick's mind raced as he weighed his options. Confronting Talon directly could be risky, but the alternative, allowing the Krenim to continue their twisted research unchecked, was unthinkable. Steeling himself, Patrick gathered his team and made his way back to the negotiation chamber. The stolen data drive clutched tightly in his hand. Talon and his underlings looked up sharply as the humans entered, their expressions a mix of surprise and thinly veiled hostility. "Ambassador Rogers," Talon began, his tone icy, "I trust you have an explanation for the commotion outside." Patrick met the alien's gaze unflinchingly, his voice low and dangerous. "I think it's time for you to start explaining, Commander. My people stumbled upon your little secret. Genetic experiments? Bioweapons? The galactic community won't take kindly to this." Talon's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening. For a long moment the room was silent, the tension palpable. Then, slowly, the Krenim commander began to speak. "You must understand, Ambassador," Talon said, his voice a sibilant hiss. "The galaxy is a dangerous place. The Krenim are simply taking steps to ensure our survival, our dominance. With these advancements, we could reshape the very fabric of galactic politics." Patrick shook his head in disgust. At what cost? "You're playing with forces you can't control, violating every ethical standard in the process. This ends now." Talon's mandibles twitched, a sign of agitation. "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement," he offered, his tone calculating. "The data drive in exchange for exclusive mining rights and a generous trade agreement. Your silence would be most appreciated." Patrick recoiled as if struck, his expression one of pure revulsion. "You really think I'd be party to this madness? I'm going to expose your crimes to the entire galaxy. The Krenim will answer for what they've done." Talon's face contorted with rage, his composure shattering. "Seize them," he snarled to his warriors. "Retrieve the data drive, no matter the cost." As the Krenim soldiers surged forward, weapons drawn, Patrick knew that the time for diplomacy had passed. The only path left was one of desperate flight and grim determination. They had to escape the compound, safeguard the evidence, and find a way to bring the Krenim to justice, no matter the odds stacked against them. Blaster bolts seared the air as Patrick and his team fought their way deeper into the Krenim compound. Talon's warriors pursued them relentlessly, their chitinous armor deflecting the humans' desperate shots. Patrick ducked behind a bulkhead, his breath coming in ragged gasps. They couldn't keep this up much longer. They needed an escape route, and fast. Suddenly Jensen called out from ahead. "Sir, over here, I think I found something." Patrick signaled for the others to follow, as he sprinted towards Jensen's position. They emerged into a vast, dimly lit hangar, and the sight that greeted them stole the breath from Patrick's lungs. There, nestled amidst a tangle of pulsing conduits and eerie bioluminescent tendrils, sat a massive starship, unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hull was a twisted tapestry of organic curves and writhing energy veins, more akin to a living creature than a machine. An unsettling realization dawned on Patrick as he took in the alien vessel's nightmarish appearance. The Krenim, they've been reverse engineering this technology. It's the source of their bioweapons, their genetic monstrosities. Jensen nodded grimly. "We have to get inside, sir. It may be our only way out of this hellhole." With the sound of the Krenim warriors' approach growing louder by the second, Patrick made the call. They boarded the alien ship, the hatch sealing behind them with a sickening, fleshy squelch. Inside, the ship was a labyrinth of twisted corridors and pulsating chambers. Strange guttural noises echoed through the biomechanical halls, setting Patrick's teeth on edge. As they pressed deeper into the vessel's bowels, the team began to experience unsettling changes. Hallucinations plagued their minds, twisted visions of writhing tentacles and gibbering monstrosities. Their bodies, too, began to warp and mutate, flesh rippling and bones shifting beneath their skin. The ship, it seemed, was not merely a vessel, but a living entity exerting its malign influence upon them. In a chamber pulsing with sickly light, they found the terrible truth. The Krenim had not merely studied the alien technology, they had been enslaved by it. The eldritch intelligence that dwelt within the ship had guided their every action, their every experiment. The bioweapons, the mutated horrors, they were but the first steps in a plan far more sinister than Patrick could have ever imagined. As the realization sank in, Patrick felt the alien presence worming its way into his mind, whispering dark promises of power and domination. He shook his head, trying to clear the invasive thoughts. They had to find a way to break free, to escape this nightmare and warn the galaxy of the looming threat. But with each passing moment, the ship's influence grew stronger, and Patrick could feel his grip on reality slipping away. The twisted corridors seemed to shift and change around them, leading them ever deeper into the heart of the malevolent vessel. Jensen let out a scream, his body convulsing as the mutations took hold. His flesh rippled and bulged, his features twisting into a grotesque parody of humanity. Patrick watched in horror as his colleague transformed before his eyes, becoming something no longer human. The others, too, began to succumb to the ship's corrupting influence. Their eyes glazed over, their movements becoming jerky and unnatural. Patrick gritted his teeth, fighting against the insidious whispers in his mind. He had to hold on, had to find a way to save his team and stop the Krenim's insane plans. But with each step, he could feel his own body betraying him, the mutations spreading like a cancer through his cells. The corridors closed in around him, pulsing with malevolent life, and Patrick knew that time was running out. They had to find a way to break the ship's hold, to escape this nightmarish labyrinth before it consumed them all. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and Patrick was determined not to let the Krenim's dark legacy be the end of all he held dear. As the mutations ravaged their bodies and the alien influence tightened its grip on their minds, Patrick made a desperate decision. He gathered his team, their faces twisted with pain and fear, and laid out a daring plan, their last hope for breaking free of the ship's malevolent control. "We split up," Patrick said, his voice strained but determined. "Plant explosives at critical points throughout the ship. We find the living core and destroy it, no matter the cost." The team nodded grimly, understanding the stakes. They armed themselves with what weapons they could salvage and set out into the nightmarish labyrinth of the alien vessel. The pulsing corridors seemed to constrict around them, the very walls throbbing with malign intent. At every turn they faced resistance, not just from the ship's eldritch defenses, but from Krenim warriors still enslaved by the alien intelligence. Firefights erupted in cramped, fleshy chambers, the air thick with the stench of blood and burnt meat. Patrick and his team fought with a desperate ferocity, pushing deeper into the ship's bowels. The mutations racked their bodies, twisting their flesh into grotesque shapes, but they pressed on, driven by sheer force of will. At last they breached the central chamber, a cavernous space pulsing with sickly light. At its heart, suspended in a web of writhing tendrils, was the ship's living core. It was a nightmare made manifest, a seething mass of eyes and mouths and grasping appendages. Patrick knew what had to be done. As the alien presence hammered at his mind, he turned to his team, his expression grim. "Get clear of the ship, steal a shuttle, warn the galaxy. I'll stay behind. Trigger the explosives manually." The others protested, but Patrick silenced them with a look. "It's the only way. We can't let this thing spread. Go now." With tears in their eyes and anguish in their hearts, Patrick's team fled, fighting their way back to the hangar. They piled into a Krenim shuttle, the engines flaring to life as they blasted free of the alien ship. In the central chamber, Patrick stood alone, the detonator heavy in his hand. The alien intelligence screamed in his mind, a psychic onslaught of rage and despair. Patrick gritted his teeth, his finger tightening on the trigger. "This ends now," he whispered, and pressed the button. The explosion started deep within the ship, a chain reaction that tore through bulkheads and biotech conduits alike. The alien vessel shuddered and convulsed, its agonized death throes shaking the very foundations of the Krenim compound. From the shuttle, Patrick's team watched in horror as the explosions consumed the compound, the alien ship at its heart. A massive fireball bloomed, searing the sky, and then a shockwave of energy rippled outward, a seething, mutagenic pulse that washed over the planet's surface. As the dust settled, an eerie silence fell. The shuttle drifted in orbit, its occupants numb with shock and grief. They had escaped, but at what cost? Patrick was gone, and the planet below was forever changed, twisted by the explosion's mutagenic fallout. The team knew that the threat was far from over. The consequences of the Krenim's actions would ripple across the galaxy, and the true nature of the alien menace remained shrouded in mystery. With heavy hearts they set a course for home, determined to honor Patrick's sacrifice. They would warn humanity, rally the galaxy to face the coming darkness, for they knew, with a terrible certainty, that the struggle had only just begun. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.